Welcome into this Tuesday edition of Daily Faceoff Live. I am not Tyler Yaremchuk, and that is not Frank Saravalli. So we are throwing you for a little bit of a loop today. And as always, this show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app today. Use the promo code NATION. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So Carter, let me ask you, how you doing today, man? How you feeling sitting in the chair next to me? Oh, we do not have any sound on you, Carter. Oh, man, we're off to a little bit of a rocky start here. See, this is what the network does. They throw a little bit of a loop at you just to make you appreciate just how good of a job Tyler Yaremchuk does. Carter, do we have you? Do we have your audio? We do not have your audio. So look, we're going to start running through the show while Carter works on his audio issues. And as we've started doing here in the last couple of weeks, we will give you our Dominion Lending Centers poll. The question on the Dominion Lending Centers poll today is, which one of the Oilers or the Panthers has a better chance of making it back to the Stanley Cup Finals? That is now live. Make sure you get involved with our question. Have your say, and we will get to the results later in the show. Tyler, we're going to give you another audio. Carter, do we have your audio now?
Am I back now? Are we going?
Back. All right. So now we can actually get to the show as we start making our way through. And I don't think there's a better way where we can really start this show without talking about the Stanley Cup Finals rematch that we saw from last night. The Panthers took on the Oilers. I think we all know what the final score was. Some people happy, some people not so happy. But what did you make of the way the Florida Panthers came back and played in this hockey game?
You think it didn't disappoint, that's for sure, Colby. This was a game where I think it lived up to expectations, right? There was so much hype, and this Panthers team has been through so much for a few seasons now. To go into Edmonton and to fight back in this game, it was just one of those ones where it was kind of, you needed your popcorn, you needed to be on the end of your seat because it felt like it was never going to end, right? It was one of those games that honestly could have went to overtime, 10-9. It seemed like no goalie could make a save, and each team had comebacks in it. But overall, I think the Florida Panthers showed why they're such a resilient hockey team and why they didn't get it done. So I was excited by this game, and I think the future is bright, but there's some things that are pretty glaring, I think, from this game, processing it last night and seeing where the future goes for these two teams.
What would you say the biggest issue would be for the Florida Panthers if they are a team that's going to find their way back to the Stanley Cup Finals?
I think for them, they're just going to have to continue to rely on depth, right? They're going to have some pieces that step in and play well for them, right? Especially looking at the Florida Panthers players that they have lost, right? You look at Montour moving on, and some guys that, I think Montour during the playoff run was so good for them, right? And I also think trying to spot Spencer Knight in a little bit more. Now, Bobrovsky's numbers aren't great this year. I don't think he was great last night by any means, but again, a timely save late in the game that holds the lead for them. And that's kind of what we've come to expect with Bob. But I also think he's 36 years old now. There's 2 Stanley Cup playoff runs. He's going to need some time to rest and recoup and be ready to set this team straight during a playoff run. But there's experience that you just can't buy, right? These teams know how to win when it matters, and that's what they did last night.
Yeah, look, I'm with you in the camp that I think Spencer Knight needs to be given a little bit more runway, and he's got to get a little bit more game action because you really need to see what you have in him after the couple of seasons that he's had dealing with the things that he's had, because I think we've now seen teams generally need their second goaltender for a deep playoff run. At some point, you're going to be counted on to come in for a couple of games and bail your team out. So we focused on the Florida Panthers. Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers and who this team really is, because they've been on a stretch that has been incredible. They finally look like the team that we expected from opening night of the season. Stuart Skinner certainly has had a better stretch, although last night not so pretty. What did you make of Skinner's performance last night in this game?
It was just one of those ones where you needed a couple timely saves, right? They're not always going to be pretty, right? He's had a good run of good hockey, and I think it's something that everyone has been waiting for. And for me, it's the fact that Stuart Skinner is so Jekyll and Hyde. I look at some of the adjustments he's made to his game. I think just depth management is something that's super important for me. Where early in the season, he's chasing the game. He's way too far out, being too aggressive, where his skill set is using his size, right? There's a skill set you can't teach, right? He's a big, strong goalie that takes up a lot of space. When he's over moving out of position, you're creating problems. I thought last night was one of those games where it's almost like he wanted it too much, right? Which is a bit of a scary sign for me. And the fact of the matter is, a guy who, was in the conversation for the Four Nations Cup and he gets left off. And now, a guy that at times during the playoffs was non-relevant. Calvin Pickard had to come in and play well. And again, last night, a big game where you need him to make some big saves. And he gave up a few soft goals. I think that's a big killer for me as I look at the Edmonton Oilers team trying to make a cup run and trying to have confidence in Skinner moving forward.
And look, yesterday we had Tyler on Morning Cup of Hockey, and I asked him about the depth of this Oilers team, and I said, does it concern you at all? And he actually gave a pretty reasonable response as why the forward depth is not a problem. And he talked about some of the guys who have been chipping in, scoring goals, and where they're at in comparison. You always know what you're going to get out of 97 and 29, but let's talk about the defensive depth, because in my opinion, you will not win a Stanley Cup if this is your group of 6. You just will not. They need more depth. They need help in the top 4. I think Darnell Nurse has turned his game around. He's simplified things. And honestly, he's been quite dominant at times, where Evan Bouchard got off to a really rough start in that game and didn't play his best. Again, I think Darnell Nurse continues to steady the ship on the back end, but I still think the depth is a big problem for this D-core.
Yeah, I agree. And I try not to be too hard on Bouchard, because there's times where, his game has been very good, but last night was not one of them. That was a tough night. I know the fall where they go down and get the shorthanded goal. I don't want to pick on that, but there's a ton of times last night where he could have been better and made safer plays. And when I was younger in my pro career, I always remember guys judging defensemen and players on what they make when they have no option, right? Who can make the safe play? Who can make the smart play? Everyone can make a good play when you have time and space. But at times last night, I thought when he had no options, he's making risky plays, turning pucks over, just feeding the piece in Florida. So I think for this back end, they're going to need more. They're going to see. And when do they wait? When do they make a move? What do they find here? Because I think there's a point where they know what it takes to push themselves over the top for a Stanley Cup playoff run. And I think right now they're missing a few pieces on that back end, Cobes. I couldn't agree more here.
Well, look, it's important to note, too, no Alexander Barkov last night. Listen, that's part of the game. I see some discourse in the chat about players that were and weren't playing. Those are never, things you can use as excuses, because you never know who you're going to have as the season gets along. A lot of times the team that wins the Stanley Cup is the team that is able to stay the most healthy. So let's go to the next topic here, something that you're all too familiar with. You played for the Buffalo Sabres. You spent time in the city. We've been talking about the palm tree comment from Kevin Adams. Yesterday, Frank Saravalli wrote a piece about a meeting that owner Terry Pegula had with the players in lieu of practice. He flew to Montreal. What do you make of the comments from Pegula and the Sabres' plans to stay the course?
It's one of those ones. It seems like it's just it's cyclical here with Terry Pegula and what's going on with the Sabres team. For years now, he's had different people in place. He's given the keys to the castle. I think early in his career to the wrong people. He was kind of, I get maybe misguided by the wrong hockey minds. And I just think this is a place where they need to, I guess a great example of where the rebuild doesn't work, right? Sometimes you can't bear it down to the bones. Early on when I was there with Jack Eichel, Sam Reinhart, these guys had the keys to the castle, right? Where at times it was almost too much responsibility. Too much was put on their shoulders, where now they get a bit of more arrogance. And I feel like where I came over from St. Louis, where we were more of a limited budget team, right? We didn't have a lot. And then I go to Buffalo, where the sky's the limit. Pegula's credit card was out everywhere we went, but we weren't winning hockey games, right? I think the culture has started to change. Now it's a matter of getting the right players in there, and I think they do. I think it's going to take some time, though, right? I even look at the Devin Levi situation, right? These are UPL getting rushed up. These goalies that most organizations that have that stability, they give them more years in the minors to work their way up. Same thing with these younger defensemen. It's hard to rush in and be a good defenseman in the NHL at 18, 19, 20 years old. It takes some time and some nurturing. So I think that's where they're at. And I understand at this point, there's not much he can do, right? They've signed some of these kids to long-term contracts that they committed to, kind of like the old David Poyle trick in Nashville. He'd lock up Ekholm and Ellis and Yossi and all these defensemen long-term, hoping it would pay off. But right now it's biting them in the butt a little bit here, Copes.
Yeah, look, we've talked about it on Morning Cup of Hockey, and I'll ask you this question. Have you ever heard of a situation where a player stayed in the American League for too long?
I don't think so. I think you can just grow experience. Yes, maybe a little bit too long, but I think it's more important. I remember Casey Middlestat, we rushed him up the NHL. Look at him now with the Avalanche. This is a player that could have been a Buffalo Sabre for life. I think if he was handled better. And even for me personally, I played 3 years in the American League from 24 to 26, 27. And I learned how to take my bumps and bruises there. I learned how to play bad. I learned how to be criticized. I learned how to manage all that, not under the NHL spotlight. When you get in that NHL spotlight and you don't play well, there is nowhere to hide. Mike Harrington on Twitter is going to be all over you, right? These are guys in Buffalo. This is a hockey market. We go to the grocery store and people would tell me how I was playing and they would talk to me, talk about it. It's tough, right? It is like all consuming. All I wanted to do was win there and I wasn't able to. I'm not glad that it's still going this way, but this is a market where you want them to win.
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of passion coming out of Western New York. You almost feel bad for the fan base at just how much they're looking for a winner. And it's a little scary when you look at the players that they've had as part of their rebuild, what they've gone on to do in other places. And I do think when that becomes consistent, you got to start looking at the top and you got to start wondering who's the one person making the decisions, putting these people in power where you're having the same results over and over again. I do think it's a fair question, but hey, you can't fire an owner. That doesn't work. We've maybe only seen that one time. It happened with the LA Clippers for absolutely something, non-game related. So moving on here to another topic, we're going to play a little bit of a game here, true or false, right? And the question that I have for you first, and I want to see what you think about this, is the Preds will move one player with term before the end of the year. True or false?
I got to go true on this. Way things have gone for I'm going true, Combs.
I'm also going to go true. I just don't see how you can continue to do the same thing over and over again, excuse me, and expect different results. That's the definition of insanity in sports. Somebody is going to have to move on. You assembled this group of older players. You don't have a center. Now I've heard Cousins' name in the mix for Nashville. We've seen Barry Trotz be really aggressive. Is he going to double down on that, or is he finally going to take his foot off the gas? I don't know. What's your opinion there?
I think for him too, like his maturity and how long he's been around, like he doesn't feel the pressure of what's going on necessarily, right? Yes, he wants to win, but it's not like he's a first-time GM. Some younger GMs have a lot more pressure on them, right? Because they don't have the longevity of a career that Barry Trotz has, right? So I think for him, he's going to do what he needs to do at all costs to try to make this team win and be good for the future, right? This is a guy that built his foundation in Nashville. He's done so much for that community, and I think he's a legend when it comes to, he'll be a Hall of Famer in Nashville forever. And I think they want to win, and they're going to do whatever it costs. And if there's guys on that roster right now who have term, who are movable, who teams come calling for, I don't think they're going to be glued down. That's for sure.
Okay, here's your second true or false question. The Washington Capitals will win the Metropolitan Division. I know what Jeremiah in the chat thinks about this one. Carter, what say you?
I'm going to say no. I like them. I think they're playing very, very well, but I just think goalie-wise, I think with the New Jersey Devils and Carolina Hurricanes, the way they defend, I think they're going to be one of those teams that push over the top just in the consistency. I love the Capitals game, right? I don't want to be here because I'm a Capitals lover. I'm with them, but I think the sustainability of this over the next 30 games, if they can do it again in the next 30, I'll be super impressed. It seems like they haven't missed a beat, even losing Ovi. And the fact of the matter is having goalies like Lindgren and Thompson come in there and play so well, I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a hiccup and a little bit of a setback at some point. But for me, I hope they keep winning. That's for sure.
And look, I know they lost to Dallas last night, but we talked about it this morning on Morning Cuppa. Lindgren made some really key saves. When it was 2-1, Dubois had an opportunity to score for Washington to get it to 2-2. Lindgren makes a couple of big saves, and then Ropa Hintz gets that third goal and on a perfect shot with a defensive lapse. But I'm going to take the other side of this, true or false, and I'm going to say true. I've been on the Washington Capitals since before the season started, not to this extent. I don't want to exaggerate. I thought they were a playoff team, but I just look at the way that they play. They play playoff style hockey. It's heavy. They've got big forwards. They're only going to get better when Ovechkin comes back. He's already skating. He's already back with the team. The boost that's going to give them. So I'm going to go ahead and say true to that. And moving on from true or false, we're going to get into our big segment, which is brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family's safety is important. They'll treat your vehicle like it's their vehicle. If you need new tires or maybe your engine has a little rattle, stop into Fountain Tire and they will sort you out. Stop into Fountain Tire or make an appointment by checking out fountaintire.com. We usually try to be moving into this segment here, Carter, the blue paint. And we're going to get into some of my favorite topics here with the goaltenders, okay? And we're going to start with Mackenzie Blackwood and the Colorado Avalanche, who made a complete goalie swap, both of their goalies, the full tandem. So my question to you would be is, who is the next team to make a goalie swap?
I think at this point, I don't know if we see a full goalie swap, but honestly, we just talked about the Edmonton Oilers. I could see them trying to find a veteran backup to come in and relieve a little bit of pressure. Yes, Kelvin Pickard, I'm a big fan, and I love what he can do, but I don't think he's a guy that has any sustainability. And with the Jekyll and Hyde of Stuart Skinner in his game, I think this is a chance for them to try to find a Cam Talbot or a team that is, falling off a little bit, where they may be able to move a veteran guy in to come in and kind of steady the ship, especially in the fact of, if he does have a bad stretch, you have a veteran that can go in and play those kind of minutes and play well. So that'd be the team for me, I think, right now, Cobes.
Who would? What about John Gibson? Is he a guy you think they would target, or it's too expensive?
I think too expensive with what they need, right? At this point, I truly believe that Stuart Skinner is their guy, right? He is the guy that is going to be their goalie. I also think that there's a chance that they need a little bit of durability come playoffs, someone that they can trust a little more with a little bit like longer in the tooth. But at that price, I don't know, Colby.
Okay, moving up north a little bit here to the Minnesota Wild and Filip Gustavsson, who is injured right now. But do you believe Filip Gustavsson has it in him to sustain this sort of Vezina-worthy season that he's putting on for the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, I honestly think he does. The way he plays, I feel like there's a lot of good suitors, right? You look at the way Jake Connors play, you look at the way Connor Hellebuyck, the American guys have been unbelievable so far this year. Anthony Stolarz as well. We'll get to him. But for him, I got to watch him play live, and his game is so boring now. He's dumbed it down. It's so predictable. And I also think he's a benefit of a strong decor and a team that plays the right way, right? But he is a guy that there's no guessing in his game. His predictability is so high. And I love where he's come maturity-wise, right? This is the problem with the NHL, in my opinion, Coach. Sometimes these younger guys come in, they play well, and we expect it to be awesome instantaneously. It takes time and maturity and experience to be a goalie in NHL, let alone a D-man or a player. But more in that, right? The mental capacity that you need to stand there for 60 minutes and manage the whole game, the highs, the lows, a good goal, a bad goal, a deflection, whatever goes on. I think he's really matured, and he has shown himself that he is one of the upcoming superstars in our league.
Okay, well, let's move to the Ottawa Senators and Linus Olar in Ottawa. You look at his numbers. He's had a stretch here where he's playing almost .950 or better night in and night out. So let me ask you, are we back to Vezina, Linus Olar? Is this team going to make the playoffs on his back? How sustainable is the way that this guy is playing right now?
I think it's very sustainable. I don't know if this is maybe the high of the high, right? Like, I think there's somewhere maybe in between for Linus. And I've been a big backer here. This is a team that I said would make the playoffs. As soon as they got Linus Olar, I thought he was get them over the hump. But you got to remember, there's a bit of decompression here too, right? You get traded. It's a whole change of scenery. He's got a family. He moves to a new city. He signs a life-changing contract, right? That is a lot of money. There's a bit of decompression that goes on, right? It's hard to come to the rink every day and have that same accountability. He's got to manage it. A little bit of an injury early in training camp, but the way he is playing is unbelievable. And this is the Linus Olar that I was treated to play with for 3 years, right? We were on a not very good defensive team, similar, and he was putting up a 919 when I was in Buffalo. There was nights we'd get 40 shots. He'd come to the bench like he was a walk in the park, not even breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, I get 17 shots and I was losing 6-7 pounds because I had to work so hard. He makes it look easy. He's a superstar, and I believe with him and that, guys will play with more confidence. It's really going to help this Ottawa Senators team.
All right, I'm going to throw an extra one at you, a little bit of overtime work here for you. Brad Treliving has just announced that Anthony Stolarz will undergo a procedure on his knee tomorrow in New York. he will miss the next 4 to 6 weeks. You and I talked about this right before the show started, and you were kind of explaining to me, maybe this was a little bit of mismanagement on the Leafs' part, the way that they've used Anthony Stolarz. So explain to me explain to everybody else what you have explained to me and why this could have been avoidable.
So goals, great example. I'm doing starting goalies right with them every day for Nation Network. And I started Wall that night because I was traveling. Next thing you know, I hear Stolarz started. It makes no sense to me. He played 2 nights earlier in New Jersey and he was the best player on the ring. And I believe it was almost 37 or 39 saves he had made, where Austin Matthews scores you out overtime under. A game like that is so taxing on your body. To be able to get 1 day off, you're traveling from New Jersey to get back home to play. Now to start again, after you've been a backup for so long, the wear and tear on your body is so high. And you've been going back and forth with Joseph Woll, splitting starts. You kind of have this perfect 1A, 1B situation. You're playing the Anaheim Ducks. It doesn't make any sense to me why you went back to Stolarz, the wear and tear on him. And I think this is a great example of how goalies need rest, playing the whole 60 minutes. And I think this is just a bit of a mismanagement situation here for the Toronto Maple Leafs. You had Joseph Woll ready to go, and now you're without Anthony Stolarz for a while. I don't like this decision at all. And obviously it's something they have to live with and something they're going to have to manage here with him out.
And here's the thing. You knew Anthony Stolarz has a history of this. This is not a new situation. This guy has struggled with his knees. He's a big guy. This goes back to his college days at Union. If I know about it, we were never teammates, right? But I was working in Philadelphia, so I when he was playing in Philadelphia at times, and I think he's always had starting caliber talent. I think what's always been difficult for him is the injury. So I think, to echo your sentiments, and I gave producer Vic a lot of hard time about this, is I always felt like when you see a guy who's playing too much, who's never played too much, based on things you've taught me, things Brian Boucher has said and taught me, you have to be careful and protect these guys because they are your bread and butter. I'd say that's one of the biggest differences for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year, is the fact that every night they know what they're getting in the pipe. And they have goaltenders who will win them games on nights where, their scoring goes cold, their power play goes cold, their injuries, whatever the case may be. So mismanagement by the Toronto Maple Leafs. We wish Anthony Stolarz well. Hopefully after that 4 to 6 weeks, he's okay. Let me just quickly sneak this in. How difficult is it for a goaltender to get injured in season from a timing perspective, a conditioning perspective, those types of things? Because I know for a player, it's obvious, a skating player, it's different than a goaltender.
I don't think it's too bad from a conditioning standpoint. Honestly, sometimes when I had setbacks or injuries, I would come back and I felt like I was in better shape because I had a chance to spend a little more time in the gym and get my body back to where I was, start of training camp. But game-like timing, it's hard to recreate that, right? You can get a lot of reps. What I found sometimes when you're hurt is you end up doing a lot of flow drills, right? Where it's things off the rush and steady shots, where when you get in a game, it's nothing like that. It's hard to generate the same amount of traffic, the same amount of pop around the net, because I find a lot of players at that point in a game are creating traffic at the net. There's way more screens. There's way more effort to track pucks. And I think that's where you start to fall behind a little bit. And for Anthony Stolarz, I totally understand. I remember going from playing, 30 games, 35 games in St. Louis, and I played 50 in Buffalo. Playing 3 or 4 games a week was very demanding on my body, and that's where I found I started to really drop off, was the fact that I didn't have as much time in the gym, right? When I played with Pecorine, I'd have 2 weeks between starts. I could really set myself up for success. Or when you're playing all the time, man, does it wear you down?
Yeah, wow. You know what? Look, we made it goalie focused today. We've got our resident goaltender from DFO with us today. Look, it's always really interesting, even for me, because it's the one position you never played, right? Like I played forward, I played D. I have an idea of how they work. Goaltending, I mean, you guys basically just speak a completely different language. So amazing insight into all the goaltending situations around the NHL. And so for that, that'll be a wrap on the Blue Paint, brought to you by Fountain Tire. All right, let's get to our Ask DFO daily inbox question. And we're going to start with Big Willie Styles' question of, what is your opinion on goaltender interference? But I'm going to add a little something to his question. So we're going to tag team this. Do you think, or to you, is it clear what is or isn't goaltender interference? Because I think we're protecting goalies just a little bit too much these days.
Yeah, I agree here. And I feel like I can stay on this because there is a little bit of gamesmanship that goes on, right? We're not stupid. We understand that we can engage contact at certain areas and get calls too. So I think it needs to go both ways here too sometimes. I think sometimes goalies maybe need to be called for interference, getting into a player and initiating that contract, right? Because contact, because I feel like guys are starting to sell it. And the last thing we want to become is a soccer match, right? Where guys are selling it and overemphasizing it. But I also feel like it's in place to protect goalies from being hurt and be able to play the position. But at some point, I think goalies walk that line of being able to initiate that contact so they can get the call and know that they're safe.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, I think that's a topic that's never going to go away. I've been yelling and screaming, saying, I do feel like I at least know what goalie interference is now. I think it's way too soft. I think goaltenders are way too much of a protected class. I'm sorry to say that to you, but at least I'm saying it directly to your face. But ultimately, it's a topic that we are going to talk about until the end of time. So before we move on to our daily bet segment, why don't we circle back and let's see the results of our poll question presented by Dominion Lending Center. Is your mortgage up for a renewal? Lock in the best rates and products with Dominion Lending Centers. Visit www.dominionlending.ca. And here you can see the results of the Dominion Lending Center poll question. And it looks like overwhelmingly on social media, 55, almost 56% feel the Florida Panthers have an opportunity to make it back to the Stanley Cup Final. The Edmonton Oilers at 44%. What do you think here quickly? Which team would you go with? Because I'm going against the grain on this one.
Yeah, I could see why Florida Panthers, just because the weakness in the Eastern Conference right now. But the fact of the matter for me is I think the Edmonton Oilers have the higher chance of making it just because of the star power, just because of McDavid and Draisaitl can carry the load and get this team over the hump. I think Florida plays more of a complete game, but if I had to go with my money right now, I'd be going with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I'd go Edmonton Oilers because I know that they're going to improve their back end. This is a win-now team, the Edmonton Oilers. They don't care about the future, as they shouldn't with the players that they have. Stan Bowman has always been an aggressive GM, and I think 2 years in a row of getting to the Stanley Cup Finals, I think that team is going to get tired. I do. I think they're going to run out of gas talking about the Florida Panthers. I think the Edmonton Oilers have learned the hard lessons on how to win by losing. So I think if you are asking me, I'm going against the grain on that one, and I think it's the Edmonton Oilers. So now let's get to our daily bets. We're going to bring on our producer, Pat Puff, and he's going to go through our betting segment. Pat, good to see you today on the screen.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me for sure, but let's see what we can do here. This betting segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Daily Faceoff Live. Open an account with Bet365 and bet on a huge range of markets. Use code NATION. Whatever the moment, it is never ordinary at Bet365. So the first one I have here for you, and I'm curious what you guys think. I've got the over in the Buffalo-Montreal game. Big reason for this, the over has hit in the past 6 of 8 Sabres games in the Atlantic Division. 2 of 3 of those against the Montreal Canadiens as well. So I do like the over there. Both teams have some good firepower that they can put the puck in the back of the net. I think this one could easily become a shootout. And I also like a little quick parlay, Jesper Bratt and Robert Thomas, both to get a point in tonight's game. Thomas on a 7-game point streak, 4 goals, 9 assists. And Bratt's only on a 3-game point streak, but has 3 goals, 10 assists in his last 8 games. So I like the odds of both these guys getting on the score sheet tonight. What do you guys think of those?
I like the over in the first one. I mean, I'm riding on that over all day. I don't know what you think, Carter.
Yeah, I don't mind it. My only concern would be the fact that they just had the town hall meeting in Buffalo, and I think the boys are going to try to defend a little harder tonight. But anytime you see the Sabres and the Habs, you got to like the over there, Patty.
Yeah, it's probably a hard pill to swallow for a former National Hockey League goaltender.
Yeah, I usually like to take the under on my bets, but I'll go with it.
Fair enough. All right, there is the daily bets for Bet365.
All right. Thanks to our friends at Bet365. Obviously, a really important partner to us here at the Nation Network. So let's wrap up the show, as we always do, with a little bit of garbage time. And I don't know if you all caught Frank Saravalli's tweet yesterday showing Andrei Vasilevsky's new mask, which changes colors based on the temperature in the building. So Huts, what's your thought on this mask? And I got to ask you, what is the most iconic piece of goalie equipment in NHL history that you can think of?
Yeah, first off, this mask is unbelievable. I remember Ben Bishop having one that was like neon that went out under the lights when you would skate out in Dallas. So it's so cool what they're able to do with the helmets. And for me, I got to stay on the mask. I think a mask is the most iconic piece of equipment, right? Because it's so individualized. It's like a piece of art. And for me, I was able to collect 22 of them along the way from my junior days all the way to my pro. Because some seasons I would have 4. I have one that actually the Baseball Hall of Fame wanted after I played in the Winter Classic. It was a mix of between the St. Louis Cardinals and St. Louis Blues. It was really cool. And I think it's just – no, I didn't. I kept it. Selfishly, I kept it for myself. I love that.
Good for you.
Because I was worried that they sent me a letter that they wanted it, and I was like, well, it's going to go in the Hall of Fame. I'm never going to get to see it again. I want something – yeah, I didn't sell it. I kept it. There's no price on that, so I'm really happy I kept it.
I would have told them, listen, you guys put $1 million in an escrow account. And if I don't get the mask back, I get the $1 million, and you guys can have the mask. Make it a little business deal. But yeah, look, I think goaltenders' masks are obviously one of the cool artistic pieces around the NHL, and I know goalies take a lot of pride in that. I'll ask you this before we wrap the show: do you have one favorite mask that you played with throughout your career?
So I had one in St. Louis that I wore that there's like gold flakes in it that my painter put in, and under the lights it looked awesome. But what meant the most to me was that year was the birth of my son Palmer, and we ended up putting his footprints from the hospital on the back, kind of like settling into the mask. So that's probably and that was a big season for me. That was the year I kind of led the league in stats and played super well and set up the rest of our life in Buffalo. So that's a super important one for me.
I'm sure your agent appreciated that year too. Contract negotiation. Carter, great job today. Hopefully I didn't screw up too bad. Tomorrow you'll have Tyler and Frank right back in their normal seats. We try to keep them warm as best as we can today. Thanks to Bet365 as always for sponsoring our show. Good work today, Carter. Thanks for rolling with us today. We'll see everybody right back here at noon Eastern tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content, from daily live shows with Frank Saravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.